Bravo.
After practicing law for many years, Mark Ahlers has become pretty good at giving advice. But as you will hear this morning, Mark is much better at giving advice than taking the same advice. With his speech titled The Principle, please welcome distinguished Toastmaster Mark Ahlers.
After a stressful day at work, I was relieved to plop down in the barber chair and forget about the practice of law. Unfortunately, John the barber had something else in mind. You see, John had just been sued by his client, Carl. Carl said the hairpiece John sold him was defective. John said it wasn't defective until Carl got too close to a bonfire and seriously singed it. How can I avoid going to court? Asked John. I said, well, pick up the phone, call Carl, and settle. John said, I can't do that. I said, well, why not? Then John uttered a phrase that still sets off alarm bells in my head. He said, it's a matter of principle. Well, I had heard that phrase many times before. The first few times, I thought it meant the client would pay any amount of money to fight for the principle. But I was wrong. What it usually meant was the client felt unfairly persecuted and expected his lawyer to join him on a pro bono crusade and vanquish the persecutor. So I usually decline such cases. Fortunately, John's case was in a small claims court. He didn't need a lawyer. When I showed up for my next haircut, John was distressed. He had failed to settle at the pretrial, and the case was now set for trial. John had lost a lot of income closing his shop for the pretrial. He didn't want to close again for the trial, so he said, what should I do? Before I could answer, John said, well, I guess I could call Carl and offer him a new hairpiece. At least I can buy that at wholesale. And that's exactly how John settled the case. 10 years later, I was sitting in a conference room with my divorce lawyer. We reached agreement on all the issues except one, the law firm building. I had purchased a 20% interest 3 years earlier for $150,000 and still owed $125,000. In my mind, there was $25,000 of equity, and I should pay my wife half the equity, or $12,500. After providing us with my wife's final offer, the mediator left the room, and my lawyer said, well, what do you think? I said, pay her $125,000? I can't do that. My attorney said, well, why not? I said, it's a matter of principle. And as that phrase left my lips, I knew I had misspoken. But to my surprise, my attorney said, you're absolutely right. He then wrote something on a piece of paper, handed me the paper, and said, if you don't accept this offer, I fear it will become a matter of principle for you, because the principle in your bank account will be seriously lacking. Well, I wanted to believe him, but I was hesitant. You see, we had contracted to sell the building to a developer. If the deal closed, we'd make a nice profit, and paying my wife $125,000 would be, well, palatable. But the real estate market was tanking, and it was doubtful the deal would close. Not only that, because our property was too small for a high-rise, We had to buy the parcel next door to do the deal and borrow a huge sum to do so. If the deal didn't close, we'd not only be stuck with two difficult parcels to market, but with a mortgage that was costing us each a couple thousand a month. After debating the issue with my attorney, I finally swallowed hard and said, well, let's do it. 6 months later, the developer still wanted to close, but only if we'd take $1 million less at closing. In exchange, he agreed to give us a promissory note for the $1 million, secured by a convoluted lien. We agreed provided he would reimburse us for the cost of hiring a lawyer who had experience handling such a complicated loan. 30 days later, as my partners and I were signing the closing documents, the developer called. He refused to pay our attorney's $15,000 fee. He would still close, but would only pay $5,000. One of my partners said, "We can't do that. It's a matter of principle." I knew we should just eat the 10 grand and get the deal closed. But my emotions got the better of me. And I blurted out, "You're right. It's a matter of principle." My partners all shook their heads in agreement, except one, Chuck Stepter. You see, Chuck had just turned 65 and was relying on this closing to help fund his retirement. Without hesitating, Chuck called his banker and had him wire $10,000. Thanks to Chuck, we closed. So, fellow Toastmasters and guests, when someone says it's a matter of principle, never question their sincerity. Just their spelling.